Welcome to the Traverse Area District Library. This program is Conscious Career Guides, and it is presented for you by Brian Truskowski. I hope I got that right. Who is a personal development coach and teacher with a vast background of diverse life experience and training. Brian has an innate ability to touch people from all walks of life. His professional career spans the gamut of plumbing, photography, multiple modalities of therapeutic massage, bodywork, and CrainoSacral Therapy. That sounds interesting. Tonight, he will explore how to be more empowered in our careers, looking at the idea of, am I happy what I'm doing professionally? Over to you.
Awesome. Well, for the people online, welcome to my hundreds of people here in the audience. Welcome. Whoa. Kind of already know this answer, but is there anything in particular you're looking to get an answer from for tonight with being here in the conversation? No, not necessarily. Okay, cool. And for the people following online, this is an interactive class. So if you have questions, put in the chat, and our person will do the best to convey it and bring it back. And we're going to have open conversation about this. So, all right. I feel like in some sense, yeah, we'll just have a fun class. This would be great. You're getting a great one-on-one. So, I feel like they already know the first. Yeah, this is great. We're just going to go through it. So, this class is about teaching, looking at careers from a positive perspective. Like, are you happy with your career? If not, you probably are listening to this class, right? And so with that, where are you at with that? At what point did your passion die, right? A lot of times I've had a number of careers and jobs when there's a marked point when the downturn starts to happen, right? And I think it's important to sort of note that and note your behavior change in that, because our productivity may just start to change. We may start coming in late to work, right? Different things may start showing up. And I think it's important to notice that. If you're already aware of that, my question to you inside of that is, for the people that have more, like a long-term career is are you just chasing the carrot, right? And the carrot is a 401k, it's health insurance, it's the long-term, it's the retirement package, right? We don't really have pensions anymore, but are you just chasing that? And I've said so many times, I have lost track of how many people that I have, engaged with that work at a university or work in a corporation. Welcome, come on in. Who work at a corporation or work at a university, and they like, oh, I have 5 more years left till I retire, so I'm just going to stick it out, right? It's just like, cool, that's groovy, but at what's the cost of that, right? What's the cost of sticking it out to your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your family's health, right? For sticking it out in a job that you are miserable in for 5 more years just so you can have a guaranteed pension, right? In this day and age, there's nothing that's really guaranteed, right? Tomorrow is not guaranteed. And not to go on a spiritual slant for it, but it's like, if you aren't happy right now doing what you're doing, my invitation and challenge to you is to question that. And it's interesting, I was doing a podcast a few years ago and this conversation came up, and I personally was working for a company for just a side job for a few months, and I realized immediately it wasn't working. I heard my body telling myself, words coming out of my mouth saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Right. And so am I listening to that? Am I ignoring that? And in that time frame, there was an event that happened where I saw something on the news that something tragic happened and people died, right? Sad, it's very sad. But a lot of times those can be catalysts for change, right? And all of a sudden I go, what if I was that person, right? Like, do I want to die being unhappy, doing what I'm doing because of some supposed thing? Right? This is a question to ask yourself. Welcome, come on in. And the question is like, yes, there's realistic and then there's reality, but if you are plugging away, really look at that why, right? Really look at the why are you doing this? Why are you sticking into a company or an organization or a job that's depleting you? Well, what's the cost of that, right? So we're somewhere between 1 and 2 on the first bullet point here. So what's the cost for that, right? And if you do stick it out, what is that carrot, right? And the last part in that first thing is what's the story that you are telling yourself that keeps you going back to that job? Thank you. Every day, right? What's that story? Is it the pension? Is it the family? Is it the what, right? And I know we live in a really complicated world right now. And what I've found is if you really want to do something, the universe, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, it's going to support you in doing that, right? And even though it may look challenging, it may look difficult at first, it's going to grow and build. So for the new people here, this is an interactive thing. So this isn't just me yakking at you and expecting notes. Like we're going to be asking, like Kim's a fun seasoned experience in my classes. Let's talk. Like I have questions. Like as we're going through this, does any of this resonate with you? What I'm saying right now? And if so, like let's talk about it, right? Because I feel like there's the richness of the class comes through the dialogue. So, yeah. Did you want to say anything? Okay, cool. So inside of that, the next thing down is there's this saying that I said, when a commitment becomes an obligation, then you have a problem, right? In anything, in relationships, in careers, in diets, in exercise, right? There's all these things to look at. But a lot of people don't realize that inside of that, there's the ability to renegotiate, right? I was talking with someone the other day who has been with the company for over 20 years, and he's getting tired of a position, and maybe there's no room for him to go up, but there's lateral movement, right? He can find a lateral job that may pay similar, maybe a little bit more, but it gets him out of doing that thing that he's very unhappy doing, right? So if we can find something like that in a larger organization or in a smaller company, like, hey, I don't want to do sales, but can I do marketing, right? Or can I do something else, right? Production, can I find some other things within this company that may be more fulfilling, or at least break it up a little bit? So finding ways to renegotiate inside isn't something that I like to suggest, because there's this idea something new is going to generate a new spark, right? And a new spark may bring up more creativity, more excitement to want to go to work and want to show up. That makes sense? So. And I know not all companies have that option, but at least it's something to think about and to consider. So, yeah. Questions? Ahas? Revelations? Nothing? Bueller? All right. The next part of this is tying into all that. It's, feeling fear as a catalyst to grow, as a catalyst to jump, right? There's many ways of looking at this. We can say for people who are single, it's like when you see someone that you have an attraction for, you want to go up and talk to that person. There's some nervousness there, right? That's fear. In all reality, it's fear, right? But what are you going to lose, right? You may gain something out of it. You may get nothing out of it, right? And in jobs and in careers, again, what I said earlier in the conversation was, I was at a job and I didn't like it. My body was literally saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Why am I doing this? My mouth was literally saying, I don't want to do this, as I'm getting ready in the morning, looking in the mirror. But yet here I go back to the same job. Why? Right? And what's that causing at an internal level? What stress, what anxiety, whatever, right? And so that fear at a certain point, I'll even share this. This is 100% real. So I love to share experiences from my life because it helps give context for all this. Oh, a long time ago, 10 years, 2010, I left career number 2 to go back to school for massage therapy. And so I'm in the process, I go through the 1-year program, and I'm graduated and I get an office space. I'm in the process of seeing clients and trying to build clientele, doing massage therapy, body work. And I'm working at something not too dissimilar than Oriana, like a grocery store, working in the produce department. And I had been working there for the whole year of school and a few years after school while I'm trying to like build my business. And my boss knows my intentions. And at a certain point, he walked up to me and goes, "Why are you here? Like, why are you here? I know you don't want to be here. I know you're gonna be happier doing that. And if you leave here, you have more time to do that." Right. So it almost like took him coming up to me to like kick me out the nest. Right. Because I was too afraid to say, "I'm done here." But he could see it. And he was a great boss for doing that. And he even said to me, he goes, "Do you remember the first thing that I told you when you started here?" He goes, "If you have something better that shows up, I will be happy and excited to watch you go away." He goes, "But if you leave in a bad way, then I'm going to be very upset about that." He goes, "I see that you want to go, Brian. I see that you have opportunities showing up. So go. Like, I'm giving you that." Right. And like, I was grateful that he did that. And actually I have another friend in a very similar situation, had a boss say the same thing. And she's like, "I know you aren't going to quit, so I have to fire you." Right. It's just like, that's a cool boss, right? Because they see in you like the opportunity and potential to go on to greater things. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. Is like, sometimes we have that fear to do that thing that scares us. But at the same time, what's the gold on the other side of that, right? There's one saying, there's the ring of fire, right? We are afraid to walk through that ring of fire, but on the other side of that ring, there's gold, there's transformation, there's also unknown, which is scary, right? And I think that's the biggest thing that keeps people glued to the floor, keeps the nail in your shoe moving forward. It's the fear of the unknown, right? But what if that unknown is generating something beautiful? You don't know, right? So you want to stay in this uncomfortable known, or do you want to jump into the uncomfortable unknown, right? And so it's a hard thing to say, right? I have personally done it so many times in different ways, meaning I've moved to different cities, I've had different jobs and so on and so forth over the years. And inside of that, it doesn't get any easier, but at the same time, it's like, oh, right. It's like working out. It's like, oh, I remember how to do this again. So if you haven't done it before, it's not easy, but just think about the cost benefit, right? What am I losing? Like going back to the beginning, like the carrot. We talked about chasing the carrot. What is that carrot? Is it retirement? Is it 401k? Is it health benefits? Is it some semblance of money? What is it that's keeping you going back to that thing that you weren't enjoying doing? Right. So that's something, if you haven't been aware of, it's something to sit with and think about. And in that, it's you got to jump. At a certain point, you just have to jump. Because it's like I said, someone's either going to kick you off, which is rare, to have someone be so grateful just to say, "Nope, get out of here," right? The mama bird kicking the baby out of the nest, so to speak, right? And in an analogy, there's a beautiful sort of story that Steve Harvey talks about. Is like, this guy is standing on the cliff of life, and he's looking out and he's seeing all these people that soaring around beautiful sails, and they're living these amazing lives and whatever. He goes, but the difference that separates you from them is they jumped, right? They took that leap. He goes, and your parachute's not going to open right away, right? You're going to have faith that when you jump, it may get a little scary sometimes. Things may get a little weird and awkward, but if you put your full faith in it, that parachute is going to open and you're just going to soar, right? And you just got to keep plugging away at it. And we'll get into different layers of this later on, but does that make sense? Have any of you had an experience in your life, in any aspect of life, where you're like, I don't want to do this, but I can't stay here and I need to make that risk to jump? Yeah. Scary, right? But my question to you is, let's pull this backwards. And I've done this with myself a lot. Where you sit now, would you rather be where you are or where you were? Right. And so if you can take that learned knowledge, and I'll go so far as to say this, I have, he's a friend and he's also a client of mine, taught natural movement, right? And he's talking about doing things that are somewhat daring, but not, right? Either walking a balance beam a few feet off the ground, or, walking, crawling on the ground, whatever it may be. He says, the first few times it may be scary, but we develop like a confidence. After we do it once, then we can do it twice. And the more we do it, the more confident we are. However, the brain has a really fun sort of neurosis to it, psychosis to it, where, I have done something successfully 3 or 4 or 5 times. And then I'm asked to do it again. I'm like, I can't do that, right? There's some weird story in my head that's like, no, you can't do that. You're going to fail. You're going to lose. You're going to mess that up. Even though I've successfully done it, I have enough data to prove that I can do it successfully, right? Can you ladies, you got that, right? It's silly. There are so many examples, and I don't mean just in career, I just mean in life in general. I've been challenged to do things that I've already done that I know I can do, but some part of me goes back into that fear of being small. Why we do this, I don't know. If anyone has an answer, I'd love to know the answer. So just taking that jump, right? Because, okay, let's pull this apart a little bit. Either of you want to share just a brief example of what was the thing that you were in and what you stepped into? What was that feeling like, in a few words? Any of you want to share that? No? Quiet. You don't want to. I'll just keep talking, but I want to give you, opportunity to. Go ahead. Okay.
It's happening in
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. And it's exactly that. Like it's scary as we're doing it, but we know it's taking us to a better place. Even the unknown, right? You can have all the interviews all day long, but reality is different than, right? As I often say, fantasy is greater than reality, right? We have this fantasy world that we create of what it is, and then there's reality. Sometimes they're equal, right? But what is that?
sometimes I feel like
Yeah, sure. And the difference between that. Yeah. Yeah, and it can go many ways, right? That fantasy, it can be unrealistic, and it's. I think it's good that there's this saying. What is it? Shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you're at least amongst the stars, right? Like have that high goal in mind, right? And the way that I sort of see it is, I've had a lot of naysayers. In maybe I don't know if
expectation.
oh, okay. So meaning other people putting expectations on you of where it's going to be at, and then the fear to try to meet that. Okay, yeah, yeah, that's absolutely. And then if you don't, then there's that difference that you have to deal with. Yeah, yeah, that's a whole other layer of that, but that's equal part of that, right? Not wanting to let them down and all that. Yeah. So yeah, that's a challenge. And then how did you navigate that? You just Oh, you're still figuring it out. Got it. Yeah, I mean that's a deeper layer of conversation in that. It's like we have to do what we feel is best for us, right? It may not always be best for what mom or dad or brother or sister wants for us. I mean, I'm a walking example of that, right? But after a certain period of time, like they'll either gain faith in you and trust in you, or they won't, right? But if you are living a life, and that could be the carrot, right? If we're living a life that's attached to what other people think of us, then we're never going to be happy, right? We're never going to satisfy anyone else, because there's going to be another layer, another story, another whatever, and it's hard, right? It's absolutely challenging to say, you know what, I know you don't agree with this, but I have to do it anyway, or I may not get to that layer or that level, whatever it may be, right? I think it happens. I've seen the story where it's the I was a doctor, so therefore you will be a doctor, right? In the family, and carry on the lineage of that. It's just like, what kind of pressure are we putting on our kids, our family, in that, right? So I don't know your specific story, but I we can talk more offline about that. But it is another challenge of trying to make other people happy. Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And so with that, it's the thing that I've found helpful is find the song, the quote, the whatever, the meme that inspires your movement, right, into whatever that thing is. Keep it with you, play that song often, print that quote out or whatever, put it somewhere where you see it all the time. Or if it's a movie or if it's a video, watch it and feel that inspiration from whatever that is. And for me, when I was in that place of not wanting to leave the grocery store and go do my own thing and doing massage therapy, there was definitely one particular song, and out of context, but the song was, "I will do things I've never done before because I'm powerful and not afraid no more," was the quote. And the second line to that was, "In the end, my body is spirit anyway," right? So kind of a spiritual conversation. But a lot of times we get so caught up in this human experience, right? The ego, the story, what's the world going to think of us? What are our family going to think of us? As opposed to, and not necessarily from an egoic or narcissistic perspective, but how does someone else know what's best for me? There is a difference in that. What I need to do to take care of myself is going to maybe look different for all of us, but it's going to change. It's going to be what it is. And I'm a running example of that, right? It's my mind keeps changing. It drives my parents nuts to no end, but I'm following happiness. I'm not following money, right? And for me, I would much rather be happy all day long and barely getting by than working at some job miserable making six figures. That's my personal belief. And that's not maybe everyone's. Some people, I know people personally who make those six-figure jobs. They hate their job, but they work that job so that they can live their lifestyle on the weekend. And if that's something you want to do, cool, don't let me stop you, right? If that's something you want to do, groovy sauce, right? But at a certain point, if that's the world you want to live, cool. Yeah, I'm not here to say my way is right and your way is wrong. I don't see it that way. But definitely find the inspiration to help put the wind underneath those wings of that sail to get you moving. And find friends, support circles, whatever that looks like, to help support that decision. Have phone calls, like for example, today there was something I was spinning out about, right? And talk with my friend, and he laughed. He goes, "Oh, that's just your normal everyday. That's your normal procedure, dude." Like the short of it is, there's all these things I was asking for, praying for, hoping for, and they all sort of showed up, but yet I'm still not happy anyway, right? It's just like, well, why is that, right? What program's running on the back side for me that I need to do the work to figure out? And he was able to help me laugh about it, work through. It was like, oh, right, this is just my crazy story that I spin in my own head. Right? But that's my own madness. And we all have our own stuff, right? We all have stories that keep us small, stories that keep us operating in that place, right? There's this idea of, we all have a story or a belief. And one way of looking at it is, whatever we're seeing in the outside world is mirroring the belief that we have on the inside. So if we're seeing scarcity in the outside world, we have an inner belief of scarcity. it may be hard to see that or acknowledge that, but it's operating some reason. That's why we're seeing it. If we have we're seeing abundance everywhere, we must have a base operating of abundance, right? Fear, whatever that may be. And the way that I sort of operate is I kind of operate in a base level of abundance. It's going to show up somehow, maybe in the most absurd and bizarre way. That'll be a storyteller later on, but it's going to show up, right? And so how do we navigate with that? Any thoughts on the last few things that I just mentioned before we move onward? Any awarenesses, any ahas, exciting things? Nothing? Anyone from the interwebs? No? All right. I'm just gonna pause to wet my throat for a second here. Am I on this camera? Oh no. Oh. So maybe we'll just touch base on what you were mentioning a little bit. Is society's got a story around how we need to be, how we need to operate, what we need to show up in order to be successful, right? And it's not real. Example, my dad, who's now in his late 70s, worked for the Ford company in Detroit for 35 years, right? Before that, he was in the Navy for 4 years, met my mom. They've been married for 50 odd years, right? And that was the way you do it, right? And my mom, I have to honestly remind her of it every 6 months, every year, of we don't live in that world anymore, because she sees me doing these little things here and there, or jumping from state to state, or having these different experiences that she doesn't understand. She doesn't have the framework to understand it. And so I am the wandering kid of the family. I call myself the prodigal son, the black sheep. She would, but regardless, I make no sense to her. After doing my way of operating for over 20 years, of me following my own path, doing my own thing, when it came time, I just moved up to this area a few months ago. When it came time for me to move up here, I said, I'm not worried, Mom, because I know everything's going to work out beautiful. She goes, it does for you, and I don't understand, and I don't know why. She goes, but you always seem to land on your feet. I said, exactly. So it took her better part of 20 years of me doing it again and again and again, successfully over again and again, for it to get through her head. And she still needed reminders of it, right? And so that touches on kind of what you're talking about, maybe a little bit, yeah. And so inside of that, it's our parents, our family, our society. And society is, oh, well, you go to school, you go to university, you go to college, you marry a person, then you get a career and you do the thing, and then right? That's like the thing. It's, there's a teacher of mine, he's no longer alive, but he used to call it the here kitty, right? We're here kitty, like here kitty, university, and then college, and then career, and then marriage, and right. And the society has this, right? Society has it figured out for you, so just follow that path, right? And so it's the people, the dreamers, the visionaries, the people who shirk whatever. It's just like there are so many of us, but we're not talked about in society because it's like, oh, that's counterculture, it's bad. It's just like, what's wrong with living that life of passion and desire and fun and excitation and drive? A lot of artists have this, right? It's how many musicians or any artists, like, probably very few musicians or artists or creatives at a childhood age were supported by their parents to go do what they're going to do, right? But how many successful musicians, artists, we're in a room full of art, right? Pushed past that and have become very successful at it, right? So have any of you heard of Alan Watts? He's like a British philosopher. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big time student fan of him. So you may know where I'm going with this. Is he says, whatever your jam is, like if it's, he goes, I'd love to make absurd points to prove a point. He goes, if your jam is macaroni art, he goes, then just do macaroni art so much that you become a master at it. And people all of a sudden view you as the master of macaroni art. And now people will pay you for your macaroni art and or pay you to teach them how to do the macaroni art. Whatever it is, like go in, all in, right? And you go, that's what artists are. That's what creatives are, right? You're going all in to do something that you have a passion for that no one else understands. Talk to any musician, road traveling musician. It's a hard life. We fantasize what that reality is. Like, oh my God, you get to travel and see things. And it's like, well, yeah, it's hard. It's backbreaking. It's tiring. It's exhausting. It's really not a fun gig at all, especially the first handful of years you're doing it. You're not making any money, probably negative money, living in a van with your buddies, you know, barely getting by. But every musician who's been successful, it has the same story of there was something beyond them that was pushing them through that to do it that made no sense. And you can call that whatever, God, source, divine, their own insanity, whatever it is, was pushing them through to do that. It wasn't their family 9 times out of 10, right? So just know that, like, we have to have trust in whatever path that we're going on with that. So yeah, that inspired, I think, everyone sitting here. It's just, there you go. So any reflections or thoughts on what I just said? Anything? Yep. Beautifully said. Yeah. It's paraphrasing, but it's like, oh yeah, be a free spirit, do what you want, but do it this way. Right? You can be creative, but in this tiny little box where you're confined to my belief structure, and that I feel, and this is what it is. This is my judgment, meaning it's my own belief, is that it's rooted in fear on a few different levels. From a parent to a child, it's fear of failure, fear that I'm gonna have to take care of them subsequently for whatever mistakes they make. And then societal reflection is fear because I have had this said to my face many times where it's, I would love to do what you're doing, but I don't think I can do it. But I'm glad that you did it. It's like, no. Like you can very much do this because I did it. You can do it, right? And so it's that we pedestalize people who are doing the things that we want to do, but we create this story that, oh, they can do it, but we can't. So I'll provide an example for you. I've lived in 7 states, and at the time I was in my mid-20s, and I was living in Portland, Oregon for the second time, and I was depressed. I was working a job that I hated, and I really wanted to live in San Francisco. And I had generated this story. I'm like, oh, it's so expensive and people can't do it, and just this long laundry list, kind of maybe similar to what you're talking about. And at the time, one of my favorite musicians were this, like, these 2 derelict guys from San Francisco. They played like this mock punk band, like the pseudo punk band from San Francisco. And they're traveling all over the country and they're playing, but they live in San Francisco. I'm like, if they live there, and then I started thinking about like all the hippies in the 70s and started thinking about all these people, like, how did they make it? I'm like, if they made it work, then I got to find a way to make it happen. And it just so happened that my brother lives about an hour and a half south of San Francisco. So I called him. I said, hey, if I show up on your door, would you take me in? He's like, yeah, sure, come over, right? But that was my stepping off point, right? You know, he didn't help me get any work, but he gave me a place to sleep for, you know, a period of time and get settled, which was great. You know, that's not always applicable, but it helps, right? He was helping feed my dream of moving forward, right? And even inside of that story, me living in San Francisco, there's so many successes and failures that could have turned me around at any time. I mean, there's a long list of them, but I continued, persevere and push through because I really wanted that and I achieved it. And then once I got there, I'm like, oh, here it is. Cool, groovy, I did it, right? And so does that make sense? Like sometimes if we have these stories, like I'm sure you probably had or your family may have had, that would have kept you from going beyond that nest, right? Yeah. And so it's awesome that you were able to do that. So do you mind sharing, was there a particular moment or something that was the catalyst that gave you that I have to do this at any cost? Right. Nice. Yeah. So you hit that point where it's like point of no return. Nice. And it was validated by that long-term goal that you maybe forgot about. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was saying at the bottom here is find that inspiration, that poem, the whatever it may be that, and you forgot about it, but was still there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Right. Have either of you had that experience? Really, you come back, you reaffirm something that you wrote maybe previously that you forgot about, that reminded you why you needed to do something else? You, maybe? Not directly. Okay, cool. Yeah, but it's fun when that shows up though. Yeah. It's like, oh, right, I've been telling myself this for how long? Let's go. Yeah, it doesn't make it any easier, but just validates that idea. So maybe this ties into the next thing. So we're going to go to the back, and at the top is visualize, visualize that desire, right? There's a lot of talk, especially as like quantum physics becomes more of a known thing. Like if you visualize that, you feel it, you sense it, you own it, you're going to generate that, right? If you feel that success, you feel it, you visualize it, it's far more than I can explain, but it's that sort of, it's not even you fake it till you make it, but it's like you're saying, like you had that vision for a long time. I want to go to the US. I want to make my English, improve your English, right? So it was in there running in the background. And there's this crazy thing that happens in the world. Some people call it synchronicity. Some people call it blessings, God winks, whatever you want to call it. But I have lost track of how many times, sometimes it's almost instant, where I have a desire and I think about it and all of a sudden some random way it shows up. Like, I mean, it could be food, it could be a phone call from a friend, it could be a job offer. I mean, it's ridiculous how many that I've had because I sort of like hold that vision and whatever it is. Jim Carrey, the actor, has a lovely saying is ask the universe for what you want, but don't be attached on how it comes to pass. Because that's the biggest thing that I'm guilty of is we think it has to come down this aisle way, looking this certain way. And when it comes up from behind and, hits us in the back of the head, it's like, oh no, that can't be it because I'm expecting it to come from this direction. right? And oftentimes we'll push that away when that's the answer, right? And the story he shares with us, which is beautiful, is he grew up in a family in Canada, wasn't very well off financially, and he really wanted a bicycle because his parents couldn't afford to give him a bicycle. You guys, ladies, know this story? And so, unbeknownst to Jim, his best friend entered him in a contest at a local store to win a bicycle, put Jim's name in the hat, won it, came over to Jim and said, here, you won yourself a new bike. Jim's been desiring a bike, but he thought it had to come through his parents. And it came from his best friend. Right. And so like, he was like just dumbfounded by this. Right. And also there's times when I'm asking, oh God, so many times, and kind of what I mentioned earlier, things are showing up that I have been asking for, but I haven't been asking clear enough. Meaning, I hear this so many times in under the visualizing, be crystal clear on what you want. Because if you aren't, I have had countless experiences of things showing up because I was too vague or ambiguous or unspecific about what I was asking for. Right. At least it'll get you closer. Right. It's kind of like, it'll get you that. And you're like, well, I don't want that. And then you can always ask for that clarification. Or you can like, well, maybe not this. Or if it does show up, be grateful for that. And think, okay, well, this, and then now, what's the next layer of that? Right. Yeah. So it can be beautiful and exactly that, and that's the model of abundance. Right? That's the model of abundance in that is, you can ask, then maybe hey, I'm hungry. Okay, here's a perfect example. This is a hilarious story. I, a number of years ago, needed a whisk. Whisk, right, for cooking. And I was going to go to a resale shop with a friend. And I told her I need a whisk. And so she knew my objective to go to this resale shop, thrift store, to get a whisk. And I walk up to, there's these guys that work in the department. I said, do you have a whisk? And they go, oh no, we don't have a whisk. And I was like, all right, because I was turning around to walk away. My friend goes, hang on. In this department, it was like half the size, the kitchen department was half the size of this room, right? And she's like, really? In all of this, there's no whisks. I'm like, I don't know. So she starts looking. Whisk. And I'm like, oh. She goes, what? I said, it's plastic. She goes, so you asked for a whisk. I said, well, I didn't want a plastic one. I wanted a metal one. Can you still hear me? I said, I wanted a metal one. She goes, you didn't ask. You said plastic. You just said you wanted a whisk. I found you a whisk, right? And I said, I want a metal whisk. He goes, okay, rummaging. I kid you not, kids. She found me the world's smallest whisk. Is probably for mixed drinks or something, right? And again, I'm kind of like, huh. She's like, what? It's metal. It's a whisk. What do you want? I'm like, I want it bigger. She goes, you had to ask. What do you want? Right? And so it's like this hilarious story of, they said there was none. I found you two, right? Like, what do you really want? And so that's exactly what you just said, right? All in my head is like, a whisk looks like this. It's this size, it's metal. And in my head, I knew what it looked like, but I didn't realize that there were more options. So as a result, I've held on to that whisk. Like it's still in my kitchen drawer, right? Because it's like, I need that as a reminder to be like, you can't be too specific in what you're wanting, right? And then in the counterpoint, society would bring up like, well, you're being too picky about what you want. How dare you ask? It's just like, why can't I vision? Why can't I dream high, right? Like, who are you to tell me what I can and can't achieve, right? So it's that, right? It's like we can achieve whatever we want. There's always a cost to it. We have to remember that. Whatever we achieve, there's always a cost at every layer, right? So we have to be able to put up with whatever that cost is. But inside of that, that's the idea of visualize it, right? Visualize, keep it in your mind, let it run. And then the other thing that I have found is tell everyone that you come up to, hey, I'm doing this, or I'm looking for this, or I'm going to achieve this, or I want to do this. because the more you do that, the more you're reminding yourself, you're programming yourself on an unconscious, subconscious level. But mostly is, there's this idea of you're enrolling or inviting other people to help you support that. Like my friend in the whisk, right? I was enrolling her to help me find that whisk. And like with Jim in the bike, like sometimes it comes through the back door that we're not expecting, right? And so the more people you can tell, because what I have found is when you enroll or ask people to help support your vision, more than likely, possibly one of them can say, oh, I have that. I can give you that, or I can help you get there, or I know someone who can get you there, right? And so for me, it was awkward at first to talk about it, but I've found is the more I speak, it's the more you say it, the more likely you're going to find someone who's going to help you get there, right? Because you got to keep putting it out. If it stays in your own head, it's never going to get off the ground. I mean, it may, because you have your own work you can do, but the more you talk about it, the more you get it out there, the more. Right. I mean, it may, but it helps the more people you put it out to, right? So, yeah, and you never know, right? I mean, what are the hour time? Oh, wow, we're already there. Holy cow. Oh, we're till 8, right? Do we have 45 minutes? Okay. I looked at the clock wrong. So, yeah, and one more example of that is, one of the things that I do is I play drums. I play music. And I've been wanting for years and years to go out and play like concerts with a band. And I moved here and a friend of mine invited me to go to an open mic in Traverse in the Commons. And I went one week and that was fun. I went the second week and my friend who came with me the first week wasn't there. So I'm feeling really awkward. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I was just about to leave when one of the other musicians came up to me. He's like, oh, I love when you played with those people the other day and it was really great, and like encouraged me. I'm like, oh. And then right after that, this couple came up, asked me to play a few songs with them at this open mic. After that, they approached me and they said, hey, we're playing a gig on Saturday. Do you want to play with us? And I'm like, I didn't tell them I'm looking to play music. I didn't tell anyone in that community I was looking to play music. But in my head, but by me going to the open mic, it was like, I'm trying to, on an unconscious level, like meet. And now like they approached me. I'm like, oh, but it was like I'm having that visualizing. I'm visualizing and telling at least my friends, I'm like, hey, I want to do this. I want to do this, right? So it's the same thing. You may not have to get it out of your own head, but by putting the intention out there, showing up at those events, right? Whatever it may be, whatever, go to those communities or wherever you're wanting to do that, be it art galleries or whatever, just show up, make yourself known and present and become part of that community, even if you don't know anything about it. Like, just go, show up, right? The next part is an interesting idea. I need another slurp of caffeine. Self-employment or working for other people. Now, this is a fun conversation. What I can say with 100% certainty is there are two different types of people. There's no judgment. There are people who need to work for other people because they need that external organization. And there's other people who are self-driven enough to get themselves going on that track. At one point I had judgment around this. Now it's all been dropped because I realized there are some people who are much better working inside an organization, being given orders and directives and operatives to go. And that's where their goal is. Awesome. And then there's other people kind of like me who hate being told what to do. And so, I've found clever and creative ways to kind of do both, right? To do my own thing and then occasionally find other gigs to work and to help support, right? But the story is like, is this a side gig? Is this taking all my life? Is this a step? Like when I moved here, I found a job working for a company that lasted about 4 or 5 months. It was a full-time job, but I realized it was distracting me from wanting to do what I'm doing now, teaching and coaching. and doing workshops. And so what I realized is that job served a purpose. And again, it showed up in really some fun, magical way, but it served a purpose to get me here, to get money in my pocket, to get me here so that I could do things, to have money to start doing other stuff, right? So if you're more with the self-employed minded ilk, if you do take one of those, know that if you make the mindset, this is the means to the end to help me get to that next layer, like the grocery store to help me do the massage gig earlier on, right? It was a step, it was a means to get me to the next layer. If you can have that as the idea, great, right? Because what I tell people, if you're wanting to go from working full-time with someone else to doing your own thing full-time, my invitation is like a slow ramp, right? And then at a certain point, you're going to have to jump off that ramp to go do your own thing, right? Because it will take time to build the community, to build the resources, to build the clients, to build the content, whatever it is that you're doing. And there are some very blessed people who are able to go from 0 to hero like overnight, literally. I don't know how they do it, but they're awesome at that, right? And you may be one of them, I don't know. But a lot of times the more realistic is to take that. When I'm coaching people to switch from career A to B, it's like, take that time, find the interim job, right? And I had one client that took a job driving for like Uber Lyft, and that was her interim job. Funny side note, wasn't funny to her, it was actually maddening to her. She was working 80 hours a week for a public school system, and her boss hated her. Her coworkers got along with her all right. 80 hours a week, was making whatever that salary was. Got a part-time job on her clock working for Uber and made that same salary almost immediately. She's like, are you kidding me? And that angered her so much and catalyzed her, after working with me, catalyzed her to go do what she actually wanted to do. And the interesting thing is what she ended up doing wasn't really much different than the school job, but she was respected by her boss. She was respected by her coworkers. Wasn't work, she was working 40 hours a week and it was salary. So pretty much almost doing the same job, same work, similar work, but it was a healthier environment. But she didn't know that because she's here and she'd been in it so long, and she had created a story of, I can't leave for all the reasons, right? And she had a breaking point, and that's when she decided to work with me. And through that, a lot of things started falling down. The relationship with her partner fell down. Things were happening with her family, and then this job. So like all these walls are just going down. But the way that I see that is things kind of have to fall apart before you can rebuild them. And when you have a blank slate as an artist, that's the best thing to have, right? It's kind of hard to like be given this thing and do something with it, right? Like, what do I do with that? And so sometimes it's easier just to have a complete blank slate to start over, to rebuild on, because then you can kind of rebuild it how you want it, right? And it may not really look much different than the original, but if you're consciously creating it with your intention, as opposed to something that's old and stale. That makes sense? Yeah. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but getting back to that, it's finding which of those are for you, right? And I think it's a clear decision. You either know or you don't, and you can shift in that. And it's interesting. I will say, I've been in many, over the years, I'm using this word jokingly, commiseration circles with other self-employed people, being like, I'm sick of things not working out. I just want to go back and work for someone else. But then the reality strikes of, oh, I make this much money doing it my own way. And if I work for someone else, I'd be making this much money. So I have to work, I have to work 10 hours to equate 1 hour in my own, like, and all of a sudden the thing flips back like, oh, okay, so I just need more drive to go do my own thing, right? So it's kind of, I've been in that cycle more times than I can count, but it's that idea, right? Like, oh, if I just go out there, get the word out, market, sell, I'll be a lot happier doing what I want to do. That makes sense? So, you know, again, like I said, there's no judgment on whatever that looks like, self-employment or other, but it's something to think about, or a hybrid of that, right? Because those also work too. You can do a little bit of both. So any thoughts on that before we dive into the big part of this at the bottom? Yes, no, maybe so, nothing. All right, talkative group today, I love it. All right, so the thing at the bottom, have any of you seen this thing, this big colorful pinwheel at the bottom? No, yes. And what was your name? Veronica. How have you worked with this? When you were doing what, sorry? Okay, nice. So do we still have people watching? Okay, so for the people watching, if you haven't already, pull up the bottom page. It's called Ikigai. It's a fun word. It's a Japanese word, meaning reason for being or purpose, right? And so there's some of these that have in the middle purpose instead of Ikigai. It's sort of the transliteration almost for it. And there are many different models of this map. Have you seen this one before with all the different intersection circles? Yeah, because the main one that comes up if you do a Google search for this is just the four main circles. What do you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. But what I love about this one is that it adds the second wheel inside of it, right? And so the Venn diagram it's beautifully put together. And so what I love about it is it really breaks it down. Like if you love something and the world needs it, maybe it's a mission, right? That's great. You know, if you love it, the world needs it, and you can be paid for it. That's great. You may be excited and be complacent, but it's uncertain, right? So I love how it breaks it down in all these different groups. Like, what is this one? This is you can be paid for it. The world needs it, and you're good at it, and it's comfortable, but you don't love doing it, so it's lacking something, right? If you love it, you're good at it, and you get paid for it. It may be satisfying, but it's useless because the world doesn't need it. Like macaroni art. How many people are going to be buying macaroni art these days? Not many, maybe in the MoMA in San Francisco, who knows, right? And then if you're good at it, you love it, and the world needs it, but you can't be paid for it, it's great. But again, like how many people are buying your macaroni art, right? So like finding unless you're really good at marketing, you know. And so in that's what I love about this. And so I'm going to invite you to just take time and sit with this, you know, and really, if you're in that place of inquiry or contemplation about next steps or where you want to go with it, I'll encourage you to sort of sit down and really kind of go through this, because there is a lot of wealth of knowledge inside of all this. And one little fun fact is, I was looking at something clever to say. Your purpose can change, right? It doesn't. I think that's the old model, and there's this concept old versus new, right? Old way, new way. Like my dad worked for a company for 35 years. Like that's not even an option anymore, right? And so purposes can change, visions can change. We have experiences in our lives where all of a sudden we were doing this and now we have to do that because something in our life is radically. A trauma happens, maybe if you have children, whatever, some major thing happens and a purpose can shift. It may be similar, but just know that like once you find that, it's possible for it to shift and change. What I can say with certainty is the mission that I have is to educate, empower, and to just support people in their journey. And I've done this in so many different ways, and I continue to do it in so many different ways, through classes like this, through workshops, through the bodywork stuff, bodywork practice that I have, massage therapy. And honestly, just sitting down and just having conversations with people. For me, there's nothing more enlivening to me. And I don't know, I'm curious for response here, but just, do you feel like there has been any fruit for you in this conversation thus far? Any nods? Yes, no, maybe so. Diagonal, not sure. In the way that I sort of see the way I teach workshops, it's rarely, and I didn't say this on the outset, it's rarely me having the authority. Like, who am I to have the authority to tell you how to live your life? It's like, here are some concepts, here are some ideas. Let's have a conversation, let's talk it out, and then we're all going to grow out of this, right? Every time I'm out and doing things, I always learn something, right? I'm learning from other people. And so that's another mission I have, is just to constantly be learning new ways of seeing the world. And what I've found unintentionally by living kind of on so many different aspects of the world is peace, actually. Meaning I have sat on opposite sides of the table with opposing viewpoints, right? Vegetarian, not vegetarian, you know, liberal, Democrat, whatever. All that I've lived in a lot of different polarities and sat happily on both sides of the table. And now, like, I've sort of found myself in the middle ground going, yeah, there's a lot of ideas out there and they all think they're right. And that's groovy. But, like, you know, I have my own perspective, which is an amalgamation, combination of all of these things. And I don't really fit in any of your boxes, nor do we want to be in any of your boxes, right? It's like, because the world wants you to be in their box. They want you to be on their sports team and want you to rah for them, and they're bad and they're good. And it's just like, we come off it, right? So it's inside of that, it's, you know, we have to really, you know, there are a lot of people in the world that are just done with it and want to walk their own way, right? And that's beautiful. However, their society doesn't really support that on a grand scale. And that's the challenge with all of this. And so that's what I'm saying, like, your purpose can kind of change over time. Like, as I learn new information, as I learn new things, have different experiences, like, oh, yeah, so what it may physically look like can change, right? Just for the fun part, you know, she sort of mentioned it in the intro, is to date, the careers that I've had any capacity are photography, construction, plumbing, like new construction, remodeling, plumbing, massage therapy, and coaching and teaching, right? Those are like the things that I have done, manual labor, right? So there's a lot of different things there. I've lived in 7 different states. I've had all these different experiences. And inside of that, my parents were like freaking out, like, why can't he just make up his mind, right? It's just like, because I'm looking for answers. I'm looking for something, right? Going to new lands to look for new answers, to get new perspective. And what I found is, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, right? We all want peace of mind. We all want stability. We all want community. We all want friends, right? And however that shows up, it shows up, right? So that's a bit of a tangent inside of all this, but that makes sense. Any thoughts, reflections? Right. Well, and that's society. That was society's thing then, right? But, you know, on the flip side of that, there is a saying that I have heard that I fully agree with to a degree. Is, you know, the fool, and I'm speaking archetypically here, the fool digs many shallow wells and finds nothing. The wise person digs one well deep and goes deep with the subject. And there is some truth to that, but also what I can say too is there's myopicness in that, right? Is if you think that this is the only hole, then sure, right? But ignoring and pretending that there aren't 100 other holes out there is sort of, right, closed-minded. So there's many different ways of approaching this. But thank you for that. Yeah. And I think that's the people who I've seen who have done that look at me with envy. It's just like, no, don't look at me with envy, right? Because it's like people, it's always the projection going both directions with that, right? And so it's like, you know, I have my own line of issues. You have your stuff. Let's not compare this. That's not worth it, right? Like, it's just definitely worth it. How are we doing over there, Scott? Any people? Yep. Woohoo! No comments. No one? Come on, people. You're staying really too quiet over there. I know we're talking over here, but please chime in. So coming down to it, that's about wrapping it for now, but I do want to mention a few things. So coming up, I have a few other offerings that I'm doing that are sort of in line with this to a degree. So here on the 29th, it's a Friday, I think it's at 11 o'clock, 11:30, something like that. I'm doing a course called Self-Care Massage. And what that is, it's a movement practice in a sense. I systematically take you from head to toe, get you in your body in sort of a fun movement exercise. And then I go head to toe and show people systematically how to like work out, tight spots in their body from head to toe. And it's fun, it's engaging. There's no chairs. You bring either a yoga mat or sit on the ground and bring clothes that can move. And it's fun, it's engaging to get people into their bodies. Lots of fun. I've taught it so many different times. Always a blast every single time. And then the other thing that I'm teaching, this is a little bit bigger of a deal, is up in Northport at Gather, which is a fun little space. It's this beautiful home where yoga happens, different workshops and different retreats and gathering experiences happen at Gather. Is what I'm teaching is a 6-week group coaching course, and it's called Digging Deep to Grow. It's 6 weeks where over the different 6 weeks will be, and it's a closed container. So limited to 8 people and looking at goal setting and brainstorming, communication, how we look at communication from a different perspective. I have this really fun way of teaching communication with drums and percussion instruments, like not words. It's really fun. I think one of these days I'm gonna have to teach that as a one-off just because it's cool. Careers, we're gonna be talking about careers there as well. We're also gonna be talking about storytelling. What stories are we telling ourselves that are perpetuating our current experience? And then there's gonna be one day where we go out in the woods and have a group experience in silence out in the woods. And that's so much fun to be out in the woods and just be present without an agenda, just to be out in the woods. I mean, I suggest that right now. Like go in the woods or on the beach and just be there without an agenda and just be quiet and just see what shows up. And honestly, that's what I can say to you is maybe homework out of this is if you're in this place of curiosity, is I have found one of the best places to get answers to go be by yourself out in the woods or out in nature, outside somewhere without an agenda, maybe a diary or something to write things down and just be present and see what shows up and be surprised on what shows up, and as an old friend once said, don't ghost your intuition. There's this idea where, oh, it can't be that. That's too easy. No, there's no way, or I can't do that. That's not possible, right? That sounds too crazy. It sounds too silly. But if the idea keeps coming back, it's like, don't keep batting away, the bicycle coming from your best friend, right? Like ideas are going to show up. And it may be unexpected, and expect the unexpected in that, because you may get some ideas that sound crazy, but they may sound really cool. And so be open to those ideas. That makes sense? So that would, if you want like an assignment to go be inspired, that's what I would tell you. And we have no lack of places to do that around here. There's infinite places to go be outside. Okay. Any thoughts, any questions on anything that we discussed tonight? Any revelations, any ahas, things that popped that were not in your mind or your awareness before tonight? Both, and you guys too, the 4 of you, I want answers. Any thoughts? Any takeaways? Something? I agree. Thank you for sharing that. I absolutely agree. You know, there's different ways of looking at that. Yeah, share with your close friends and people that you trust. Yeah, I don't mean like give them the entire 10-page outline, right? You know, but I like what you're saying to kind of build that support. Are you open to a challenge question on that? Is what if someone that you love in not in an aggressive way, but challenges you and asks you questions? I have a reason I ask. I have a brother who is like academic empirical by the book, right? And he's like, well, what about this and this and this and this? And I sometimes appreciate that because it gives me a chance to go deeper and refine my position on something. So just something, I don't know if that, I agree with what you're saying, but I'm asking this, I'm sort of being like the curious question on the other side. Does that make sense? Challenges it, but in a good way.
Oh, it's good. It's like,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then there is a third perspective, and this isn't at you, but it's just in general, that I have heard some people that just go completely in the hole and they don't tell anyone until they launch it. Like, don't even tell their best friend, whatever it is, like writing a book or doing a project or whatever. So I mean, that's even a third way of looking at it, right? Like, so there are many ways. And so yeah, I love, thank you for refining the question and refining what you thought. So thank you for that. Any other reflections, thoughts? Do we have anyone from there yet? That's nothing. Quiet people, eh? Oh, trolling us. Okay. So any thoughts that either you want to share? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay, that's fine. Okay. So one thing, I guess we're close enough for this, is thing I ask at the end of every workshop that in class that I teach are two things. I'm working on refining this, Kim. Is because I say that is because of this. I asked this question at a class a few classes ago, and someone challenged me on how I asked it. So I'm trying to refine on how I asked this. Is what's something that happened tonight that you appreciated and enjoyed about the experience? Is one thing that you can share if you want. You guys too. And secondly, what's something that you may want to see different next time? Something that you may have had a preference or desire to see something done differently that would have been more supportive for your experience tonight. The reason I ask this is because I have found over the years of teaching that I can like grow by having feedback, right? Because I'm not like, I do this right, and I don't care about, like, I want to learn. I want to learn how different people see things. So if there's anything, especially you guys, if there's anything, there's a computer over there with camera online. So that's what I'm talking to people. That you saw, either that you appreciated, that added value, or something that you would like to see maybe in a different way next time. If there's anything you have to offer, I would love the feedback. Thank you. Awesome. I like that. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone still? Bueller? Nothing. All right, that's fine. He's out riding Mercedes somewhere. So cool. All right, well, we are done a little earlier than we had planned, but yeah, that is that. So thank you for spending an hour and a half, hour and change with us tonight. And like I said, I have the class on massage on the 29th, and then the group coaching in October. So it's October 4th. It's a Wednesday, or Wednesdays from 10 to 11:30. So for 6 weeks in a row. And I do have information. Gather Northport is where it's happening at, up in Northport. So you can look them up. And I do have information on my social media pages with that as well. So yes, that is that. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. Thank you, the unknown four, for joining us. And have a wonderful evening. Yeah, thank you. Yay.